Welcome, everybody. We so appreciate your attendance here for the September monthly event. Our chapter, we embrace the vision as it fits and aligns with our ATD national vision. We are focused on the Southwest Florida to create a community that works better. And our mission is to empower members to operate at their full potential in developing workplace talent by using the ATD capability model. Next slide, please. We do offer various resources. We've adjusted with the COVID crisis. As a reminder, we offer one-on-one support, resources, and assistance to our members. Please feel free to reach out to us. Our website is listed here on this slide. We also have our monthly events that are virtual, and we will continue doing that until it's deemed safe to resume in-person events. Our webinars are relevant, and they are aligned to the ATD capability model. And so we look forward to that and today's session that we have for you. Next slide, please. We have our next upcoming webinar for next month is going to be Susan Miana. She'll be doing the ABCs of learning strategy development. So we look forward to that. Next slide, please. And today's presenters, so happy to have Crystal and Lisa with us today. They're going to be presenting on design for learning in the modern digital age. So we want to welcome you both. We're really looking forward to your presentation today. Thank you. Next slide, please.
That's it, Janner. If you want to talk a little about our presenters and then.
Is that it? Okay, Janner. Yeah, I'd like to introduce. Yeah, Janner, please come in. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Again, like Erin said, we really do appreciate you being kind of flexible and understanding in our new normal at the moment as we go through COVID-19 and work to find, our new normal. As Lorianne mentioned, not only are we committed to your professional development and growth, but we also want to keep you safe and healthy. So until we figure out a good time to get back together and see each other face to face, we'll continue in a virtual arena, but hopefully it won't be much longer and we'll see everyone very soon. Today's speakers are Crystal and Lisa. Crystal is a two-time TED speaker. She's also an organizational consultant and has worked with clients such as General Mills, Southern Company, Monster.com, Sierra Club, and other organizations. She works with bringing organizations into the digital age, reimagining strategies for career development, learning culture, inclusion, leadership development, and also employee engagement. So we're very happy to have Crystal. Lisa is also a learning expert, and she applies learning science to creating engaging training programs that move the business forward. She founded Training Design Strategies, got that right, in 2012 to help achieve that goal and drive that forward. She's also on the DCATD's Executive Advisory Board and has been an instructor for the Ohio University's Instructional Design Graduate Program. So thrilled to have you both. Hopefully we'll learn lots about the new book, Designing for Modern Learning, beyond Addie and Sam. So I'll turn the floor over to you guys. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for that introduction and also for the warm welcome. We're really excited to be here with you all today. I'm just going to dive right in and start with a poll. We wanted to understand a little bit about what roles you all are playing in your organization. So just in a second, you're going to see a poll launch up. And just curious, are you in a role where you're delivering training, designing training, leading the training strategy? And if you're doing something else, just note that in the chat for us. Okay, cool. Seeing some folks across the board. Seeing a few more responses coming in. Okay, great. So let me see if I can share the results with you all. So we're seeing a number of folks who are delivering training, seeing some folks designing training, leading training strategy. And then Lisa, if you don't mind helping me, just because I can't see the chat, is there a comment there on the other roles folks are playing?
Yes, my role is more encompassing for all of them, and also help with job descriptions, role alignment, org design, so a little bit more on the HR side. And from Susan, I teach management skill information. So that's a very specific part of the L&D work.
Fantastic. Okay, that's really helpful to hear from everyone, because one of the things as we're thinking through the learning cluster design model is that we are so excited about the future of L&D. And so when we think about the future of L&D, we see a lot of possibilities for all of these roles. And today, as we introduce the model and we talk about designing modern learning, we hope that you see a connection back to your role. And I think based on those roles, we'll definitely hit some pretty deep connections with what you all are doing on a day-to-day basis. So we like to start by sharing this quote from Albert Einstein. He said that learning is an experience. Everything else is just information. I love this quote because there's no time that it could be truer than today. In our digital age, we all, our employees, our customers, our stakeholders, us ourselves, we get more information than ever before. But that's not what makes something a learning moment or a learning piece. It's really the experience. And that's what we in L&D are so really good at, and that's what our job is to provide that experience. So how are we doing when we try to deliver that great learner experience today in our digital age, in our digital context? Did you know, and I'm sure many of you see these stats a lot of times, we see these in white papers a lot, and we see things like this. 33% of learners say current training programs are not a productive use of time. 8% of business executives see the business impact of L&D. What's interesting about this statistic is in the same report, it was around 90% of executives saying that they felt that L&D is extremely important to their business strategy and the future of their company. But they're just not seeing that impact. And then even this statistic, less than 25% of L&D professionals are willing to recommend their own programs to peers. So this is just a small snapshot of statistics. What we would love, wouldn't it be great if we could get positive numbers on these questions all the time, or at least more of the time? So the reports that we saw, and especially as Lisa and I started our work, and in these last 5 years, how we've been seeing the L&D industry evolve, we're still seeing that traditional L&D approaches are falling short. We asked ourselves why. Our journey really together started about 5 years ago when we were asked by ATD to design a course on modern learners. Instead of just looking at modern learners, we looked at modern learning, and we asked ourselves, what's holding us back from more positive numbers on these? Is it new technologies that are being invented? Is it our relationships with our customers? Is it changing talent expectations? We really found that it's all that and more. As we've moved from the industrial age to the digital age, a lot has changed. And we're looking at how L&D needs to change in response to those shifts. So let's start by putting ourselves in the shoes of a learner. If you wanted to learn something new today, how would you go about learning it? This was a question I asked myself back when we were starting this, and I want to take you through a modern learning journey that was personal to me. There was a time where I was traveling to France. It was obviously not COVID at this time, and I was traveling with my family. Now, my family relies on me 300%. I don't know if you all have that kind of experience, but I'm like the linchpin. Everything was going to be down to me. So I knew that I needed to have some kind of capability in French. We were traveling all over the country, road tripping. And so months before the trip, I started learning French. And here are some of the things I did. One of the first things I did was I downloaded apps. on my phone. I got some popular language learning apps, started using those, but found that, I just I was picking up some random phrases, but not really sequentially learning the fundamentals. And that's just what I felt like I needed to learn French. So I went on YouTube. I could have signed up for a formal class, but I went on YouTube because I was looking for something free. And I found this guy, Learn French with Vincent. And he had this whole thing, Learn French in 5 days. Granted, each of the videos were 5 hours long. So I started watching those, and it reminded me a lot of high school class. And I got the consonants, the vowels, how to pronounce things, which was really vital, all of those sorts of pieces of learning. I then started speaking French to my husband at home, which is fine because he doesn't understand me half the time anyway. So now we're just socially learning and practicing together. I made some flashcards because I realized coming closer and closer to the trip timing, I just needed to memorize some really key phrases by this point. Apparently strawberry was one of them, probably because I like my pastries. And then I started looking at more fun ways to practice French. And I went on meetup.com, which is a website where you can meet up with people with similar hobbies. And I actually found in Atlanta, where I'm based, there was a French language meetup group. So this was everything I tried before I even went to France. But you can imagine that my learning journey didn't stop there. When I was actually in France, I would be in cafes and I would overhear how people are ordering things. I would pick up some things in the moment. And when I ran into issues, I had Google Translate to help me. I had my Rick Steves French phrase book to help me as well. So when I look at all of the different ways, times, and places I learned, I find this to be very representative of how modern learners learn, and very different from what we often deliver in the workplace. So I want to do another poll as you think about your learning journey, your modern learning journeys. What are some of the ways that you use to help you learn? And I am just bringing up the poll question here. And you can mark all that apply. And of course, I'm sure there are some other ones that are not listed here. Again, feel free to put those in chat. Seeing about half the folks have voted. All right, we almost got everyone. Okay, cool. Let's see what you all put up there. So you should be seeing the results now. Oh, I love that. 100% of folks said a more experienced person. That's interesting to me because we've got that strong social learning component. And we talk a lot about social learning in L&D, but that's definitely a big modern tool. And then second up on the list, search, Google or other. Now, this is something I always comment on, and that's what does our relationship look like with our IT folks internally? Because I know that most company intranets are not as user-friendly as Google or other search engines that we use personally. So great, it's great to see the variety of ways you all are learning. And with that, I should have stopped sharing the poll results, and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Crystal. Happy to be with all of you today, and maybe next month I'll be there in person, but of course we're still meeting virtually. So what's interesting to me is that you all are already learning differently beyond just the classes and courses. And L&D needs to modernize even more beyond what we've done in the past. We've modernized with e-learning and webinars, but now we need to shift more fully into this new reality that we're facing in the digital world. But we need to get others to come along with us on that modernization journey. And we need a story to help them understand why it's important for us to make even more changes. So I'm going to give you your sales pitch. I'm going to talk to you about what things have shifted for our learners, what things have shifted for our business, and the fact that we need to address those shifts as we modernize L&D. So here is your sales pitch. Learners, what shifted for our learners is the how, when, and where they are going to learn. It's totally different. They're no longer tethered to their computer or stuck in a classroom. That has changed. Who delivers and creates training is different as well. Anyone who has a Word blog or access to LinkedIn or access to their own portal on the web, they create training. It's not just L&D and the experts the L&D people point to. How all of our learners find information has changed radically. It's no longer just the card catalog in the library. Information itself is ubiquitous. I was fascinated by an old worker who was working at my place doing concrete work. Couple teeth missing, good old Southern Kentucky boy. Didn't look like he made it through high school. He got to talking with me and started talking to me about the Federal Reserve and how our money systems work. And I asked him, where'd you get all this? He says, oh, I study every night on the web. So how do we find information? It's all different now. And how do we ensure that that information is reliable? That's a huge question, especially in this election year. What we do in the past is rely on the experts or the channels. It's always great to have the L&D brand stamp on it that says, oh, this is legitimate. But more and more people are saying, I want to ask my peers. I want to ask people who are in situations like me to find out if this information is not only reliable and true, but is this information valid for me in my context with what I do and with what I believe. So that's what shifted for our learners. Now, what are the shifts for our business? Obviously, the pace of change has radically changed over the last 20 years, and the C-suite is very worried about, can talent keep up with all these shifts? And the answer is no. In fact, our leaders can't even keep up. Leaders are finally having to raise their hand and say, I don't know, because none of us can know all of it because it changes so quickly. Instead, we need to find resources to help us stay up to date with those changes. Global and remote work is upon us big time, especially this year. And the question then becomes for the business, do our people have the soft skills to support this type of work? Our demographics have been shifting. We now have 5 generations in the workplace. And how do we get the knowledge to transfer from those who are going to retire maybe someday or maybe not to the younger people, and even more importantly, from the younger people to the older people? How do we get people across all generations to share the knowledge they have so that others can learn and we can all learn together? In addition, the type of work that we've been doing has changed. 50, 60 years ago, you could count on 80% of the work being hands-on physical work. And that's when most of our instructional design models were created, is back then. But now, 80% of our work in the US is cognitive. It requires thinking, it requires creativity, it requires empathy, it requires problem solving. And so we have complex capabilities that we need to teach our people. So this is your sales pitch. Use it to help others agree to go with you on your journey to modernize your L&D organization. To help you do that, we've put together the Owens Kadakia Learning Cluster Design Model. We believe this is the model that will help you rapidly get through modernization. Use this once for one project and then start using it for more projects. If you want to know more, yes, please do read the book. Happy to autograph that for you when I get to Cape Coral, or I'll even send you a book plate with crystals and my signature on it. Now, today we're going to walk you through in a little bit more detail 2 of the actions in this model. This model is comprised of 5 actions that L&D is the right group to be managing. We're the ones who have the knowledge on how to make this stuff happen. And it starts with the center, surround learners with meaningful learning assets. That's the action that L&D needs to take. Now, that means we're going beyond one and done training. We're not just giving them one training, either a class or a webinar, and then we're done, because we know that's not how learning works. We surround them with meaningful learning assets that take them through their learning journey. But it all starts with us focusing first on what has to change. What has to change on the job? Now, it used to be we were focused on the change that happens in the learner's heads by the time they walk out of the classroom. Now we've got to make sure that we get that focused on what are the on-the-job behavior changes for the learners who need to make the change. So let's look at the next action. We in L&D need to take the action of learn. We need to learn learner-to-learner differences. Now, we've always done target audiences. You have that great big group and you put in descriptions and say, this is who we're targeting. This is our target audience. What I find is that within that group, there are lots of different types of people. But can I find 2 to 5 learner personas, little groups within that great big group that have similar interests, needs, and requirements on how they want to learn and need to learn? If I can get my learning assets to meet their needs, I am in great shape. Now, you might be sitting back saying, okay, so what is a learning asset? A learning asset could be something as small as a 1-minute YouTube video or a 1-pager or as large as a 3-month class. How are you going to decide what is needed? It depends on those learner-to-learner differences. What do they need? When, where, and how they need to learn. So we focus on the diverse learner context. Now, as we create this surrounding learners with meaningful learning assets, we create what we call a learning cluster. And that learning cluster is not just designing all these little pieces and parts, but it's strategically pulling them all together so we have a whole surrounding learners with a learning cluster, which also means that our tracking of information and our successes and our learners' successes and our business successes comes across very differently. We've all struggled with trying to track, here's one class, and did it have an impact on the business? But when you take a learning cluster and you track the whole against the business success and learners' behavior change, we can take a radically different story to show our successes. So you might be asking, okay, so what is this learning cluster? It's a set of intentionally selected learning assets that are in and out of the flow of work. In class, out of class, right in your hands, maybe something you look at on your ride to and from work if you've got somebody driving for you. So it's in and out of the flow of work, when, where, and how the learners want and need to learn for their on-the-job performance. And what we've discovered is that how learners learn is a little bit different. We put it into 3 buckets. They learn through social, formal, and immediate learning touch points or ways. And if you take a look at, listen back to Crystal's story about how she was learning French, the things that she chose for her to learn on her learning journey fit into those social means, the formal means, and the immediate means. And it's a composite. And this social, formal, immediate Venn diagram can help you make sure that you've covered all the needs of your learners, that and cover their 5 moments of learning need. Check out Mosher and Godfredson if you're not familiar with the 5 moments. So let's go a little deeper on the change action. And then I'm going to turn it over to Crystal to take us a little deeper on the surround action. See, let me double check. Any questions? No questions at this point in time. Do feel free to drop questions in the chat. We'll come back to them later, but as you think of them, don't lose them. So with the change action, again, we're starting right at the beginning and we're focused on the job behavior. Now, traditionally, we've always had some kind of objective. So traditionally, Crystal, thank you. The traditional L&D limitation was that our learning objectives focused just on what you could get at the end of class, at the end of using that learning asset. And we did that because, and we're still doing it regularly, because that's what we feel in L&D we can control. Before they walk out the door, I can give them a quick test or ask them an answer, ask them a question, have them give me an answer, and then I can tell whether or not we've met that learning objective. And the business, all they care about is, hey, did you give them training on this topic? So we're done, one and done. Unfortunately, in today's modern L&D world, that is not sufficient to make us viable in the business world, to help us connect with the business and be relevant. So we need a breakthrough, and here it is. We have created a new strategic performance objective, an SPO as we call it, strategic performance objective, that identifies and solves for the business pain and delivers on the job performance change. Connecting those two is key. What is the business pain that we're trying to fix? And what is the on-the-job behavior? What does that look like if learners have learned what they need to learn to fix this issue? So let me give you a comparison example. Traditionally, an L&D objective would be, by the end of this consumer relationship management software, by the end of the new CRM software training, marketers will be able to demonstrate adding and updating customer relations and discuss the benefits of the new system. They sound pretty familiar. Those are common objectives. Hey, we got a new CRM software. Obviously, what we're doing is we're teaching them how to use the software. In modern L&D, we do it different. Here's what we do. We have a strategic performance objective, and this is what it might look like. By getting marketers quickly up to speed on the new CRM software, the business will gain 2 points in positive customer metrics, the metric they're already tracking. And at work, here's the behavior difference we're going to see. Marketers will access the old database less frequently 5 days after the go live training date. Wow. They'll access the old database less frequently, because here's the pain point. Teams will sign off on archiving the old system a month after we go live, thus reducing the cost to run both systems simultaneously. That's what they were really asking for. So our learners were used to using the old system in their flow of work. We're getting them to do their work in the new system and feel so comfortable that they're willing to give up the old one. That's what L&D is about, not just training people on how to use software. That's the new L&D, the modern L&D. So with that, let me ask you to think about and write in chat for me. Yes, there's always a quiz with training, because that's the only way we can get our brains to work with questions. Here's the question for you. How are you going to reveal the business pain in your organization for your next project? Start thinking about what can you do to get them to tell you their business pain so that you can solve for that versus just give them the topical stuff they want. So I'll give you a moment to type that in. How can you reveal the business pain? And I'll read your comments.
Yes, Bern, I'm seeing a comment from Bern, interview key stakeholders. Great. That's a big part of these actions is that each of them has a tool to guide L&D. And in that, Bern, you're absolutely on point. We talk a lot about interviewing key stakeholders to reveal that connection.
Quick comment there. Vern and I are working on his learner personas, And he's actually going to be interviewing his George Washington connection to work on a training there. So he's interviewing. I'm so excited to hear his results coming up soon.
Seeing a great comment from Janner, having debrief sessions with interviews to discover hidden concerns. Hidden concerns, I really like that phrase, Janner, because I think a lot of times we talk a lot in L&D about needing to know the business need. And with the LCD process, we really have a structure to do that. And it is a lot about discovering those hidden concerns and continuing to push on stakeholders to move beyond the order taker kind of request of give me a training on this to know, hey, what is it you're really looking to achieve? What's really the pain you're experiencing? Doing analysis, listening to common themes, that's great. If you can interview more than one stakeholder or have more than one sponsor in a project to talk to, you get an even more rounded view of what that business pain or on-the-job behaviors might be. Story time.
And it was good.
Yeah, go ahead, Jan.
We did. We had all of the people from the different divisions, so we probably had feedback from, at least 10 people. So it wasn't just one perspective. It was pretty surprising.
That's great. And I think with Dr. Laura Ann's comment, storytelling, I love that because one thing we find is once folks have articulated a really powerful strategic performance objective, they actually use that after they've developed their learning cluster to tell people what that learning cluster is all about. And because it's written in this way, it's not written for L&D, it's written to connect L&D to the business, to the learners. It has that greater sense of urgency for change baked into it because it connects back to that relevance of day to day. What should we be trying to do differently? What do we hope to see differently with this cluster? So great comments. That is great to bring us into the surround action. As Lisa mentioned, we're only going to cover 2 of the actions in our talk today, but really encourage you to connect with us and also read the book, learn more about this model because there's a lot of power behind each of these actions. Really, when we get to the surround action, we are talking about the heart of the model. And the heart of this model is really, as Lisa was saying, all about this new job for L&D. Historically, when L&D started, we weren't in this place of designing multiple assets. That's something new. And that's really one of our traditional L&D limitations. We often, when we get a capability goal or we hear a gap in our business or we hear an ask from a stakeholder, we're talking about designing one thing, be it a class, an e-learning, maybe a set of videos. So our traditional limitation is that we're trying to cram everything into that one learning asset to make a business impact. And that's a lot to put into one asset, especially when things like the neuroscience of learning tell us that people aren't going to have that learning transformation in a one and done moment. They are going to need multiple assets, just like me and my journey around French, across the flow of their arc of learning about something. They're going to need different assets. So we see that L&D's new job is really around designing multiple assets and doing that in a very strategic way tied to what it is we want to see change on the job and who our learner personas are. And another traditional L&D limitation, we are seeing folks starting to design multiple assets, but they're often randomly designed. They're often randomly organized. We might have some videos here. We might have a class for someone to take here. But thinking about the whole, how do these assets work together? Who are these assets speaking to? Who are they for? Those pieces are missing. And that's really what we get to in our breakthrough with our surround action, is we take the learnings from our change action, our learn action, our upgrade action, and we really intentionally and strategically select which learning assets are going to make up our learning cluster. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. I will give you a case study and an example. Imagine that we have a business ask, pretty typical business ask. And this, by the way, was a real case study we worked on. We have this business ask around assessors working on a compliance initiative. There was a big culture change initiative going on around work processes, and a part of this culture change was compliance to these work processes. So they had a role called an assessor who would be checking to see, hey, how are folks complying to these new work processes? And the business ask was, let's create some training for these folks. The existing training they had was essentially a set of SOPs outlining the compliance project. And this was for a global manufacturing company. So the particular audience was global manufacturing site leaders. So here's how we did as we went through the learning cluster model. When we went through the change action, when we looked at what's the real business pain going on, what's the real on-the-job behaviors this organization would like to see, what we learned was that it wasn't just about the compliance like pass fail, a blame type of culture. It was much more about coaching. They wanted deviations from the work process not to be addressed just, as a scorecard or report, but really for these assessors to actually coach the organization. And so this represented a huge shift from the original ask and the original learning objectives around knowing the process and what is compliant, what's not compliant, to including content and learning assets around coaching, which was not really a focus at all initially. When we went through the learn action, we had some hunches as we were thinking about that target audience. Hey, maybe there's some difference in our global manufacturing site leaders. Maybe there's some differences by region. Maybe folks have different cultures or language understanding that might impact this learning cluster. Maybe there's differences in technologies. So as we started talking through these, we started interviewing different folks. What we learned was actually the language and the regional cultures weren't necessarily the most important. What was important was those differences in sites due to technology. It turns out there were some manufacturing sites that were much more complex than others. Maybe they had more different types of technologies versus some sites that only had one technology. And so compliance to work process in these different sites was different, and the assessors therefore needed different learning assets, different content to address their needs. And so it actually led to a concept of, hey, we really might want to include case studies to help these folks apply the work process and compliance standards to their particular site that they're assessing. So this really created unexpected assets. The client originally thought we were going to take these SOPs, put it into a formal how-to kind of class, how to use that SOP, and a bit of workshop in that class. But we really went beyond that. And so this was the actual learning cluster we built. Of course, we did have that class to provide foundational learning, but then we also had some immediate learning assets, which I saw, Janner, your question earlier. Immediate, we define that as 24/7 available, 24/7 available learning assets, completely self-directed and available all the time. So we added 2 immediate learning assets. We upgraded the SOPs with a rubric and sample case studies, and we also included a coaching skills self-assessment. And this was, again, because the SPO really helped us, that strategic performance objective really helped us shift towards the importance of coaching. And that's really also where our social learning came in. We went more with offering coaching practice with a peer, so creating kind of a community between assessors, and then also developing some coaching conversation guides. So that's really just an example of how a learning cluster start to finish can be formed. And it really created some unexpected impact in their case. And hopefully you're starting to see some of the differences between what we say when we're saying we're designing modern learning versus traditional models. So I'm curious, when you think about training initiatives you're working on, what other assets outside of programs would help learners in their moment of learning need? And I'll let you all noodle on that a bit, but I do want to leave enough time for questions. So I'm going to keep moving forward. But I'd love to encourage you to think about some of the learning assets you might add outside of programs.
Crystal, real quick, Eve was asking, could you give an idea of what was the mix between self-directed versus formal in your example?
Yeah, sure. So when we take a look at this, we had so one of the things in our learning clusters is we recommend folks develop about 5 to 10 learning assets per learning cluster. Outside of 10 learning assets, it starts to get a bit tough to manage. So the mix of self-directed and formal definitely depends on your learner personas and the SPO you've got. In our case, we really have quite a few self-directed components after they've gone through that formal class. This coaching practice with a peer, it's up to them, right? If they're going to schedule a time with another assessor to practice. Coaching conversation guide, all of these are immediate resources someone could use. And that's because when we did our learner persona work, it was also pretty clear that these folks, so we're really going to want things that they could use when they run into an issue and as they're preparing to go in and do that compliance review. Those were the two big moments of learning need. And both of those are self-directed, right? So it's up to that learner persona. Do I have a compliance need coming up where I can use some of these learning assets, or have I run into an issue? And I'm seeing some great thoughts on other assets, infographics, short videos. That's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about those learning assets outside of programs. It can be something really small, or it could be something bigger as well. So what happens when you start delivering learning clusters as your core thing? We talked about it as one training initiative. What if your L&D strategy looks like delivering learning clusters as your norm? This is just an example from Bluescape Software, which is a software as a service company. And one of the things that they did was they actually attended our 2-day workshop back in 2019. And in our workshops, we're doing them virtually now. You actually come with a current training initiative and walk away with a learning cluster by the end of the workshop. So that's what they did. They came to the workshop, they designed their learning cluster, and they had some huge ahas during the workshop. They realized that they had been organizing their target audience by characteristics that really didn't tie into their outcome. They ended up reorganizing their learner personas based on people's role with the software. Whereas they used to have them organized by their level of knowledge of Bluescape software in general. So it went from a topic knowledge basis to what's their engagement with the software? What are they using it for? And they completely created a cluster based around that engagement rather than what's their level of knowledge, which wasn't as relevant as they discovered. So they presented this cluster back to their sales function, and it just intuitively made so much sense to them, to their stakeholders. They were like, this completely lines up with what our users have been asking for. So the buy-in really increased. They've actually now increased their team to a team of 10. And you can sort of see their arc there. They funded a video studio because videos became a learning asset that was consistently coming up across the learning clusters that they were building. And so it became a reason to invest in a particular technology for them. They were like, we really need this video studio. We're delivering it over and over again and seeing this pattern. So these are just some of and we've seen these kinds of stories come up more and more, because the more people start to deliver learning clusters, or the concept of learning clusters, delivering multiple assets with on-the-job change, the more the business is feeling the impact and feeling the relevance of L&D. So to sum it up, when we're talking about what LCD is about, it's really leaning into how modern learning is actually happening. This is a graphic from Degreed, just showing all the ways that people are learning in the flow of work versus outside the flow of work and across time. And what we see is the things that L&D typically offers are being visited maybe every month and really more often every quarter. And so we think L&D has a very important role to play in all of these things that are happening in the flow of work. And we think that L&D can really deliver wins for the business and for our learners as we do so. So that, I'll turn it over to Lisa to close us out.
Great. Thank you, Crystal. When we look at the Owens Kadakia Learning Cluster Design Model, we'd love it to be the only model you ever use, but that is not the way we designed it. We actually designed this to be an overarching model to help you modernize using the skills and the models you're already using. So take a look at the ones on this slide: the Kirkpatrick, 4 levels of evaluations, design thinking, Addy, Sam, Agile, the ROI models, Bloom's taxonomy. All those things that you're using, this and more, should either be feeding into the overarching model, or the overarching model ought to be feeding into those different models themselves as you design one and done kind of training or one individual learning asset. So yes, when we design an individual learning asset, we'll want to jump into our tried and true models. But to design a learning cluster, to modernize, we need this overarching model to bring the whole picture together. So with that, I'd like to ask you what your key takeaways are. And in chat, if you could jot down 1 or 2 things that intrigued you enough to have you try out the LCD model. And one thing, while you're thinking of that, I'll show you briefly. Crystal mentioned before that there are tools in the book for each and every action, and I'll just show you briefly so you can see. It's a very graphic type of book. So you can see we give you lots of space in these tools to help you walk it through. Here's another set for upgrade the existing. You can see lots of space there to guide your thinking and help you get there very, very quickly. So what is it that's causing you to be intrigued enough to say, I want to try this, like Vern is doing?
I'm seeing some great takeaways coming up on chat. And yeah, definitely want to just emphasize that we have a very short time today to walk through this. So we focused on 2 of the actions. Each of them have, again, very detailed tools behind them to help guide you turn these concepts into action. So with that, wanted to just let y'all know we're doing a free book raffle for you all. If you wanted to enter that, if you go to lcdworkshop.com, and throw in your email, we'll be able to pick a winner, hopefully in 7 minutes. But I also want to open it up for some questions from you all. And feel free, I think you can go off mute on your own as well. So feel free to just go off mute and popcorn in some questions, or type your name in chat if you got a question there. I like seeing the learning clusters matter. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So as I was looking down earlier, I had my phone and I was putting your book into my cart.
You're breaking up on us, Janner.
I was putting your book into my shopping cart.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No, thank you. I really like the model.
Earlier, Janner, you were asking about what do we mean by immediate. And let me give you a quick rundown of social, formal, and immediate. Social, in our mind, is not just social media. Social is anything involving people. Classroom involves people. Webinars, when we're looking at each other, involves people. Chat, being able to comment. I've actually asked Zoom to start allowing us to add little check marks or smiley faces against other people's public comments so that we can all chime in with them and be more social on that. So social involves people. Immediate is something available on your own when you need it, whenever you need it, wherever you need it. And formal is something we define as something that has a start and a finish. And if you wanted to, once they do the start and get to the finish, you could give them a certificate for completion. That's how we look at formal.
Yeah, that's
Other
interesting.
questions?
We've been moving to immediate more and more so probably the last 12 months.
Yeah, something that's interesting about this when we think about COVID and the move to remote learning, a lot of folks, as they think about remote learning, they automatically jump to e-learning or videos. And something that the LCD model really helps with is continuing to think about what are the social aspects we want to include, what are the immediate aspects we want to include, what are the formal aspects we want to include, and thinking about how that benefits our learner personas. So we're not very prescriptive around it has to be this method or way or time or place. What we're doing is really providing that framework, which expands us to thinking, you know, just because we're remote, does that mean we have to remove the social component entirely? What can we do? And it helps ask those questions or elevates those questions to us as designers and L&D strategists thinking about that piece.
And to that point, I've been working with the Southern Connecticut ATD chapter on their fall conference. And with working with those folks, I've discovered one of the issues people are finding in their workplace is it used to be they could pick up the phone, use the company directory, and call somebody. But now with everyone working from home, they don't have the phone on the desk and nobody has a directory of all the mobile numbers or their home numbers. So now they're struggling to connect their people for the casual questions that you would do, quick give them a call, get the answer and be done. So they're struggling with that. It's something L&D could possibly help with.
So I'm seeing a few folks enter our book raffle, so that's great.
Oh, I'm not seeing it. It's only on your end?
Yeah, sorry, I can only see it on my little back end here. Yeah, we can, if you want, we can go ahead and do that. And if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to jump in. So how about this? How about Lisa, can you pick a number between 1 and 7?
My favorite number is 3.
Susan,
I won an award.
You are the lucky winner. I think
Who?
she might have had to drop off. It was a Susan Anderson.
She's there.
So I don't know if I still see her in our participant, or you're here. Okay,
Oh,
great.
she's
Congratulations. For some reason, it's not showing up on my little Zoom window, but you got it. And yes, everyone else, buy the book. But thank you all so much for participating in that as well. You all are sweet. Cool. So any other thoughts or takeaways that are resonating with you all that you'd like to share?
I would personally like to thank the Southwest Florida ATD group. All of you together over the last few years have helped me as we've developed this model. Some of your names are actually in the acknowledgments of the book because you feed me, I share things with you, you give me feedback, and we are all modernizing and learning and growing together. And I absolutely love it. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it as well. I know many of you know Lisa, so this is what she's told me a lot about your group, and it's great to finally meet some of the great ATD folks down there from afar. So thank you all for having us.
Far.
Back to Janner.
Just thank you very much for being our speaker today. I thought it was fantastic. I hope that everyone had a great time. And again, thank you so much.
See you.
Thank you all. Take
You
care.
guys have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. See you soon.